Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We are live once again. This is Royal Fulani Living Sew School, and let me just check a few things just to make sure I'm in the right source, and I am. Welcome to our YouTube channel, Royal Fulani Living Sew School YouTube channel. We have been trying to put this together for months. So we had a little bit of roadblocks with going live on YouTube, which is the one place that we wanted to be for our live tutorials, because we felt like all the other social media platforms were, had to do a live on Instagram, we had to do a live on Facebook. So we wanted to create one place, one time for anyone and everyone to join our Sewing Shortcut Saturday or Sunday. And we didn't want you to be confused about where they were going to be, where we were going to be live. We will be live for Sewing Shortcut Saturday or Sunday on YouTube every weekend. So just to kind of give you an overview, I am Mina. I am going to be your sew guide for Royal Fulani Living Sew School. I am the lead creative and founder of Royal Fulani Living, which is a lifestyle and fashion brand that I created inspired by my bicultural life as a Senegalese, West African, and an American. We basically create our own original African prints, and we apply them to everyday products. So the Sew School is a passion project for me. I am a 20 plus year fashion educator. I've taught college, I've taught high school, I've even taught a few preschool classes for my daughter. So I just felt like this was needed. We specifically gear our tutorials towards the neurodiverse learner, the new learner, and someone who's never sewn before. And the reason why I selected neurodiverse is because being an educator in the school district, a public school district, and being part of an amazing professional design program that was geared towards high school students who were interested in fashion as career, architecture as a career, all forms of professional design as careers. Mine specifically was fashion design, because I also have like 30 plus years experience in the fashion industry as a freelance designer and design assistant and designer. So this is a passion project for me, because I feel like, as someone who learns differently, learning how to sew was difficult for me in the beginning. One, because I'm not a multi-step direction person. So I need one step at a time. I execute that, and then I need to go to the next step. And a lot of times with some sewing tutorials, it's an entire garment, and then you're like searching through or scrubbing through the tutorial just to find that thing that you're looking for, whether it's sewing a button on, whether it's how to do a plain seam. So we are geared specifically towards new sewers, neurodiverse sewers, and novice sewers. So if you've sewn before, but you put the machine away because you got frustrated, whether it was you didn't know how to thread a machine, you didn't know how to thread an empty bobbin, or you just didn't know how to drop your bobbin into the machine, we want to make sure that we create single, realistic, beginner sewing tutorials just for you. And that's what the channel is geared towards. And if you look at our list of tutorials that we currently have, you'll be able to go and say, okay, I need to know how to make a plain seam. That's there. It's not a plain seam in a garment. It's not a plain seam for a shirt or a skirt. It's just a plain seam. And so I found that as a fashion educator, when I taught in what we call a chunking method, which is breaking things down into intervals so that creatives could digest it easier, it just worked. It worked all the way across the board, even for those of my students who did not have learning differences. So simplifying things with sewing is what we're here for. We're not here to frustrate you. We're not here to make things more confusing. So as you know, over the past few weekends, we've been doing our Sewing Shortcut Sunday and our Sewing Shortcut Saturday. And what we've been doing is picking one specific topic to focus on. So last week, the week before, we did a bias bound seam finish. And then the next week, we applied that bias bound seam finish to an actual garment. So you can see how now the thing that you practice is now you understand how to apply it to a garment. So it's important for us to take the steps that we need to, so it's meaningful. Our tutorials have to be meaningful. It just can't be make a shirt and you see the finished garment and we're not showing you the steps in real time and in detail. So as you can see, those of you who have joined us week after weekend after weekend, you see the actual machine, you see the actual stitching, you see the actual cutting, you see the actual pressing, and more beginner sewing tutorials need more of that. So today I am so excited. I love teaching beginners. They are my favorite population of people to teach because there's something magical about someone creating a seam for a first time and seeing that excitement of, I did it. Like I actually sewed. Just to sew in a straight line is difficult enough. So to get that down and to master that. So I'm a big believer on mastering something before I move on as an educator. That's how I taught. And I found that it just worked exceptionally well with all types of learners of different learning differences and those who may not have had learning differences. And it just made for a harmonious educational environment. So today we're going to do the flat felt seam, which oftentimes is called the jean seam or the denim seam. So I'm going to go to my other camera so you all can see, so I can give you a little bit more of a view and move my computer. So as you can see, I have a roll of denim, and most denim is going to be woven. So we'll talk a little bit more as we go on and as you advance about woven and knit fabrics. So the most common thing or difference between woven and knit fabric is, of course, a woven fabric normally does not have any stretch. It doesn't have stretch vertically and it doesn't have stretch horizontally. So you see this, it doesn't stretch that way and it doesn't stretch this way. So this is what I call a complete and full woven fabric. Then you'll have a fabric that has some knit. You'll find denims that have a spandex content. So there's, when the fabric's being created, there's the technical term lycra that's added into the woven to create some form of stretch. This is not what we're using. The best thing I recommend for beginners when you're sewing and you're just starting, stick with your wovens first. Master your wovens first. There's a range of fabrics that come in just woven that you can choose from. Don't think you're limited to just the woven fabric. It's going to be boring and I'm going to have to, no, woven will give you that structure that you need. You're doing jackets, you're doing shirts, you're doing skirts, you're doing bags, you're doing, home decor, whatever it is that you're sewing. I love to start beginners with a woven and start beginners with 100% cotton because it is the most beginner friendly fabric. It is the most forgiving fabric. It is the fabric that you can make a mistake and seam rip it out. And there's not a lot of damage to the actual fabric, where I find with knits, a lot of times when you make a mistake, the seam ripping, it may put a hole in the knit. It depends on silks, things like that. So I always encourage my beginners to start with a pure woven fabric, and your wovens have a range. So today we have this lightweight denim, sometimes called chambray. Okay. I wanted to execute and practice our flat felt denim seam in an actual denim fabric because I wanted you to be able to see it in the actuality of it being in denim. So I'm not using muslin today, but I'm going to practice my flat felt jean seam or denim seam in an actual denim so you can get a full understanding. Now, somebody might be saying, what is a flat felt seam? Okay, so a flat felt seam, and I have a pair of my own jeans, and I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. So a flat felt seam is a strong seam with two lines stitching showing on the right side of the fabric or the correct side of the fabric or the outside of the fabric. So when someone's wearing it, you see it, okay? That is produced by folding one raw edge under and the other and stitching it flat or slip stitching it on the wrong side. I don't slip stitch it. I use the machine for this entire process, which I absolutely love, and it gives me the best results as far as my jean seam or my flat felt seam. So I'll show you all just in case you're trying to understand how it looks in a garment. These are my jeans. As you can see, this is a flat felt seam. Okay, so you see the seam is completely encased. Okay, your raw edges are encased. There's no raw edges. There's no industrial finishing machine that has been used for this because it's an encased seam. So this is a flat felt seam, or what we call a denim seam or a jean seam. So if you look at the inside, as you can see, same thing, okay? But what's going to happen is it's going to be unusual because our normal technique would be to put our wrong sides together. And as our wrong sides are together to make a seam, and that seam, the seam to be on the inside of the garment. But with a flat felt seam, the magic happens on the outside of the garment. So as you can see, this is the center back and going into the crotch of my jeans that I have. Flat felt seam here. It's a fully encased seam, no raw edges, okay? The difference with this, okay? This is my side seam, which has an industrial overlock or serged or marrowed finished edge where it's cut and bound and finished. That is a different type of seam, and we'll get to that in a more intermediate and advanced classes. But as you can see, your flat felt seam, I love a flat felt seam in denim. I love a flat felt seam. I even use it sometimes in I'll take a flat felt seam and I'll use it in something that I'm creating that's a little bit more evening wear-esque, or something that I want it to be a little bit more dressy. I'll take this seam sometimes and use it in a very interesting way to create a different, or take a casual seam finish and use it in something a little bit more a step up or a level up as far as a garment. So for instance, if it's an evening gown, I may use this seam as an interesting design element to add a little pop of something casual, but combining casual with something that's formal. So it's not designated just for denim. It's not designated just for jeans. The great thing about understanding what your seams are and what your seam finishes are is that you can now take these, and these become now ways for you to experiment with design, not just in illustrating or drawing or making, but I always say I love to look at the details of a garment. That's what attracts me to a garment. Sometimes the shape of a garment can be basic, but if I see like a great detail for the pocket, or a flat felt seam where I wouldn't normally see a flat felt seam, or some type of beautiful seam finish, that attracts me to the garment. So a lot of times, to set yourself apart, and this is for my entrepreneurs who are sewing to sell, and I always use that term, you may want to do something different. You may want to have patch pockets on a gown. You may want to do, everybody's doing the inseam pockets on a gown. That wasn't a thing before. Like, you would see evening gowns and there were no pockets, but now you see evening gowns and you see there's the set-in pocket, or the side seam pocket, or a pocket that is not normally there on a gown. So you see women on the red carpet and they have their hands in, the side seam pocket. I love a good pocket, by the way. So that is what we're doing today. We're practicing the flat felt seam, our denim seam, our jean seam. Let's get started. Okay. So as always, I have my woven. Okay. What I want to do is take my ruler. I'm doing a practice sample. I want to practice before I put it in a garment. Before I ever do anything in a real garment, I always practice it in a sample first, or I practice it in a muslin, what we call a muslin, or a prototype of that garment. I never go right into my actual fabric. So what I want to do is take my ruler, and I can work from the wrong side of this. So as you can see, the lighter side, and sometimes people play with, fabrics. Sometimes somebody will say, I like this side better and I want this to be my exterior. I would say, as a designer, that is your, creative choice, and you may have a different aesthetic. This is actually the correct side of the fabric. That's the way it was woven. That was their intention when they made it. But sometimes we experiment a little bit. We like this lighter kind of chalky side, so we'll use that as an exterior instead of it being the interior. But today, I'm going to keep it traditional, and I'm going to use this as the correct side of my fabric, which faces out as I'm wearing the garment, and this as the wrong side of my fabric, which is the part that faces my body, okay, when I'm wearing it. So I want to take my roll of chambray, my roll of lightweight denim, and I'm going to push this out a little so you all can see, and roll this up because I don't need that much. And once again, Selvage, selvage, selvage. Remember, we have conversations about this selvage. This is the most important part of your fabric as a whole. You don't ever want to cut this off. You don't want anyone else to cut this off when you purchase it. If you see them doing it, correct them. The selvage should not be damaged or cut when you're being sold the fabric. The fabric is to be cut on the cross grain when you're actually selling it and taking yardage off to sell to someone, not the straight grain. Okay, so we need the straight grain to stay intact. We need our selvage to stay intact because our selvage is the reference that we use when we want to lay out our patterns, create a garment. We need this to stay intact. It is the finished bound edge of our fabric. If you see anyone in a fabric store cutting it off as they sell you the yardage, stop them. Okay, so I'm giving you permission to stop them. Don't let them cut the selvage off. If you see them cutting it this way, that's a no-no. Okay, so it also helps you save fabric. It's you ruin the yardage when you ruin the bolt or the roll when you cut the fabric against the grain or you're cutting crosswise, because you're cutting off this, which is our selvage, which we absolutely positively need, is the biggest reference that we need on our fabric when we're cutting our patterns and sewing. So what I want to do is take my see-through ruler, and as you guys know, on our YouTube channel, Royal Fulani Living Sew School, we have a series of tutorials already up. We have tutorials about your first sewing machine. What should I buy? It gets confusing because there's so many brands. I give you my recommendation as a fashion educator of 2+ decades of what the machine was that worked the best for me and my student designers. And that is up on our YouTube tutorial page. It is actually, I believe it is lesson 1. So you can go to lesson 1. You can take a look at the range. I do a whole review of the different brands. I do price points. So lesson 1 on Royal Fulani Living Sew School channel is our first lesson, and that tells you what machine to buy. The number 2 tells you about all your attachments that comes with the machine. That can be confusing and frustrating as a first-time sewer. So I would absolutely encourage you, go look at the YouTube. You browse our YouTube tutorial page, browse Royal Fulani Living Sew School. Those tutorials we also put up on all of our social media platforms. We are on every single social media platform. Pick one, anyone. So here we go. We need to use our see-through ruler, and this is one of the supplies that I recommend in lesson 3. When we get into supplies, I break that all down for you all. That is on the Royal Fulani Living Sew School page as well. I believe it's either lesson 3 or lesson 4. It's one of those lessons, but it's on there, and it specifically says supplies. So you don't have to go searching for it in a larger tutorial. So our tutorials are quick, simplified, and to the point. So that's what I want to offer you all. So what I want to do is find the 4-inch mark on my ruler. There it is. I want to lay this edge of my ruler along my selvage, and I want the 4-inch mark to lay on my raw or cut edge. Okay, so I want to just make a small mark, give myself a small mark there. Okay, I'm not making a line all the way up. Now, here we go. If you don't remember anything, remember this: snip and rip. Okay, snip and where your line is, this is 4 inches, and rip. Okay, your woven, your beautiful woven fabric is going to rip beautifully and perfectly all the way up your roll or your bolt. As you all can see, snip and rip. Okay, don't cut, because your hand is not steady enough and perfect enough to cut it a straight line, and it's wasting fabric. You don't want to cut. If you have a woven, 100% woven fabric, snip and rip. Just remember that. Measure off what you need and then snip and rip. So I'll put this over to the side. Okay, so I have my panel. Okay, now look at what I have. On 2 different ends, I have my selvage on this end, and I have my selvage on this end. What I want to do is take those 2 selvages. This is what I'm talking about when I say you need the selvage for reference. Don't let them cut your selvage off, and you don't cut your selvage off. Take your selvages, line them up, put them on top of each other. We need to have 2 4x10-inch chambray lightweight denim panels. Okay, so I'm just grabbing my magnetic pen wand. Here it is. Okay. And that also is in our tutorial on basic supplies for beginners. I want to insert my pin and just line up my selvages. Just make sure they're together. Nothing, too crazy, too wild, too complex. Okay. So I want to pin them together, and then I want to take my panel. And what this also affords me to do is I can, once I measure this out and cut it, I can actually use the remainder for other samples. Okay. So I lay them on top of each other like so, smooth it out. Look at my panel. Look at my panel, everyone. My panels are perfectly 4 inches going all the way up, all the way down. The reason being is because I snipped and ripped. I didn't cut it with my scissors because that's unnecessary. It actually is not the industry way of actually getting your yardage or taking fabric off. So always remember, snip and rip. When you have 100% woven, measure off what you need, a yard, 2, 3, and then snip and rip. So what I'm going to do is just smooth these out, and I'm just going to run another pin. Okay. And as you can see, my woven loves to fray. Okay. And just get rid of this. I like to clean up the loose threads as I go. So next, what I want to do is I need 2 4 by 10 inch panels. I take my ruler, and this is a little off. Fix what you need to fix, correct what you need to correct. Okay. Practice makes progress, not perfection. Okay. So practice makes progress. Don't compare your sewing capabilities to someone else. You're learning. Okay. So it comes over time. And I will say this to anyone who's a beginner, whose intentions are to sew to sell or to be an entrepreneur, a fashion entrepreneur. Perfect your craft. Perfect your craft. You should be able to make a garment, and someone should be able to line your garment up with something that is retail or purchase, and they should not be able to tell the difference. And the only difference would be yours does not have a tag yet. So, or a label. So what I want to do is take my 10-inch marking on my ruler, line that up with my selvage, and I want to just make a small mark with my pencil. Okay, there. Okay, then I want to go back in. Need a pin, just want to keep these in place. Use as many pins as you need. Okay, the more pins does not make you a better sewer or a novice. It just means you just need more pins. I know pins, I use a lot of pins just to keep things aligned and in place. Okay, so I'm here. The line that I made, I'm taking any line on my ruler, lining up any line on this side, any line on this side with the edges, raw edges of my sample there. And I'm drawing a line. Go over it a couple times with my number 2 pencil. Okay. And I can't really see that, so I'm going to go over it again. Press a little harder. All right, there we go. That's better. Okay. Then all I want to do is take my scissors, my fabric scissors, of course, as you can see. Okay. And I want to just cut on that line nice and straight. Okay. There. Right. Now I can put this to the side, and I now have my panels that I need to do my sample. Okay. This here, 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 and as you can see, I have 2, okay, 4 by 10 inch panels, which is what I need to practice my flat felled denim jean seam. Okay. Now, I want to show this to you, this next part to you outside of the machine, because I feel like it's so important. Now, what you'll normally see when you're sewing is they'll say, put your right sides together. So your right sides would be whatever side is the correct side of the fabric. Your correct side of the fabric is the side that faces out when someone is wearing the garment. It's the side that faces out when someone's wearing the garment. It's the side that everyone sees when you're wearing your dress, or you're wearing your pair of pants or your jacket. So Normally, we would do right sides together, okay? With a flat felt seam, denim seam, jean seam, we're not going to do that. We're going to do wrong sides together, okay? Wrong sides together. And the great thing about the sewing channel, the Royal Fulani Living Sew channel, is our tutorials that we put up. We put up pre-recorded tutorials that are step-by-step tutorials. We do our live tutorials, and we also have what we call like our carousel post tutorials, which are like the steps, but with the actual directions in writing, because everyone learns differently. I am a visual learner, so I learn by doing, okay? I'm a tactile learner. I learn by touching and doing, okay? So there I have my wrong sides together, wrong sides together. I can take a few pins and put a few pins in place. Make sure my raw edges are lining up with each other, nice and smooth. Raw edges together, wrong sides together, and raw edges together. Okay, raw edges together and wrong side together. Okay, so here I go, and here. And don't worry about little imperfections like that. Okay, you're practicing. And that's why I always encourage, do a prototype first. Don't jump right into a garment as a beginner. Learn your fundamentals, your techniques, master your machine, master your seams, master your seam finishes, and then segue into a garment. It just makes life so much easier. I know there's so many individuals who started as beginner sewers and just got frustrated because it just wasn't detailed enough, or just wasn't at the pace that they needed it. So I have a few pins, as you can see. All right. So now I'm going to go to my machine. I'm going to flip you all to back to that screen, and one. Okay. So we are at our machine, and I just want to say I'm grateful for Switcher Studio because it allows me to be able, and I'm not endorsing them, I'm not getting paid to endorse them, but it just is a really good app for those of us who want to teach step by step by step. So I'm really grateful for Switcher Studio. What I want to do next is I want to find my 1 inch, and I'm focusing my camera so you all can see. So remember, we had our live about our seam allowance guide on our machine. So I want to find my 1 inch seam allowance guide on my machine. Usually the 1 inch seam allowance guide is the last line on the machine. Okay, so it will be, your needle is at the center position, because remember, your needle it shifts to the left and it shifts to the right depending on what it's sewing, but it's at the center position. Okay, and you want to make sure that 1 inch seam allowance guide on your machine is 1 inch from the needle over to the right if you're right-handed, and or 1 inch to the left if you're left-handed. So what I mentioned before is I'm older. That my original sewing machines in the 90s, let's just say in the 90s and early 2000s, we didn't have this. Like I'm so excited that they're now catering more to lefties and righties, because I felt like there was always numbers on the right, and I'm right-handed, but there was never numbers on the left, or if there were numbers there were lines there, but there weren't numbers. So I'm so glad that today's machines have those corresponding lines. So what I want to do is take my sample where I've actually pinned. I want to line up the raw edges of my sample with my 1 inch seam allowance guide on my machine. Raw edge of my sample, line it up with my 1 inch seam allowance on my machine. Okay. Then what I want to do is make sure the top of my sample is sitting right in front of where my needle is going to go down, the position where my needle is going to go down. I don't want to be too far in, and I don't want to be back here. Okay. So I want to have my sample, raw edge of my sample lined up with the 1 inch seam allowance guide on my machine. And then I want the beginning or the top of my sample to line up right before my needle. So, and then I want to lower the foot of my machine. I want to press down lightly on my foot pedal. And of course, I'm going to take this pin out because I just don't need this pin. So I'll take that out and move forward. I'm going to reverse. Okay. So don't forget to reverse. Remember we talked about reverse ties off the beginning of when you sew and the end of when you sew. Okay. What that does is it keeps your seam in place. It keeps the seam from coming undone. It keeps the seam in place. So you have to backstitch, use your reverse feed when you start, and you backstitch when you end. So let's go all the way down. Keep the raw edge of your sample lined up with your 1-inch seam allowance guide. Okay. Keep checking and making sure that your fabric layers are lined up one on top of the other. Keep them together. Don't worry about speed, worry about accuracy. Okay. Just because someone sews fast, it doesn't mean it's a good seam. It doesn't mean it's a neat seam. It doesn't mean it's a professionally executed seam. Take your time. The more you sew and progress, the faster your sewing will become. So I'm going all the way out. And as I go all the way out, I want to backstitch. Okay. So lift my foot, the machine of my machine's foot. I want to take my sample, make sure and pull it out to the left. And this week I have my nippers, clippers, snippers, whatever you want to call them. And I just want to make sure I give myself a lead. Don't cut it to the quick, because then you'll end up having to rethread the eye of your needle. Make your threads go to the back of the machine. Let's go over to our ironing station and quickly get our ironing board up. Our cute little ironing board, cute little portable ironing board. Push these things over to the left and back so you all can see. And as you can see there, here's my iron. We always have this conversation. Okay, so accurate pressing is equally as important as accurate stitching. Okay, when you don't pressure seams as you go, it makes the difference between something that looks thrown together and not professionally executed. And when you pressure seams as you go, you're going to see a big difference between the quality of your garment, your finished garment, and the quality of your sewing. If you create a seam, press, create a seam, press. Yes, it is tedious. Yes, it is a lot. But if your goal is to get better and better and better, to make your own clothes, to make your kids' clothes, to make something for friends and family, to make things sewing to sell, yes, you cannot skip this step. Okay, so my iron, of course, has a little safety thing that goes off so I don't burn down the house. And I just put it face down, let it get hot. It is on a cotton steam setting. Okay, and as far as brands of iron, I don't recommend one or the other. This is Hamilton Beach. This is what I've used in fashion education for the past 20 years. It works. They're great irons. I love them. My students never had problems with them. Once it goes, I get rid of it and I just replace it. So I would say on average, this probably would last me about 5, 6, 7 years, probably more. So, and you want to have an iron if you're looking to professionally sew or sew to sell. Have an iron outside of the iron that you use for your family. So have an additional iron that you just use for your projects or for your things that you're sewing to sell. Have an iron that's just for your particular things that you're making and sewing outside of your family's iron. Because the worst thing that can happen is someone goes to put iron on an iron transfer, the glue gets on the iron, now the glue is on the iron, and now that glue goes onto your garment. So what we want to do next is take our sample. We want it to be seam allowance facing up. And as you can see, we've got our threads that we have to clean up. Clean up your threads while you're sewing. Don't wait until the garment is completely finished. Don't wait until your sample is completely done. I guarantee if you don't clean your garment or clean your sample while you're sewing, there's nothing worse than seeing something come down a runway and you see threads hanging. So as someone who struggles with executive functioning, I take the necessary steps to be able to make sure that everything gets done the way I want it to get done, and it's based upon industry standards. So I'll only teach you all based upon industry standards. So our sample spacing up, my iron is ready to go. Make sure it's giving me some good steam. It is, okay? And I want to press my seam allowance flat and open. First, I pried it open with my fingers. Then I take my iron and I press this flat and open. I love the way cotton presses. It presses so beautifully. Cotton is my favorite fabric to work with. It is my absolute favorite fabric to work with. So I want to just make sure I press the opposite side, okay? Remember, this is still our wrong side of the garment. Remember this is still our wrong side of the garment. So even though we did wrong sides together and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, my seam allowance is on the outside. It's supposed to be on the outside. So we've got to take the steps to get to our flat felt or jean seam, okay? So I pressed it. I want to make sure there's no distortion. Make sure it's nice and flat. Make sure there's no puckering. Okay. I see a little bit of puckering there, but I'm just a little bit more of a perfectionist. So I press that out, steam it out. Okay. Next, what I want to do, and I think I can do this on the ironing table to make it quicker. So I want to take my ruler. I want to take one of these seam allowances. Doesn't matter which one. This one or this one. I want one. Okay. I just want one of these seam allowances. And I want to hold that seam allowance with my fingers, right and left hand. I want to keep that seam allowance going to one side and the rest of my sample going to the other side. Doesn't matter if it's going to the right or left. Let's do it again. Grab one of those seam allowances, this one or this one. Let's take this one. Hold this seam allowance with your fingers and then pick it up. Flip everything else to the left. My seam allowance stays to the right. Okay. Do it again. Hold my seam allowance with my hands, my fingers, pick my sample up. Everything else goes to the left. My seam allowance stays on the right. So I don't want anything else underneath my seam allowance. Okay. Then what I want to do is take my ruler and my pencil. Usually on something like this, I would try to use my white chalk pencil or my wax. Okay. This is 1 inch seam allowance. I want to take my ruler, line up the 1/2 inch mark on my see-through ruler. There's my 1/2 inch mark going all the way down, all the way down. Remember we talked about being able to read a ruler. It doesn't matter if you didn't learn it or you did learn it. If you didn't learn it, I'm here to help you with that. Okay. So I'll just raise my hand. I'll be honest. I really didn't understand how to read a ruler in elementary school. It confused me. All those little increments and numbers. And then we had the old school wooden rulers with the little metal lip. It confused me. So this ruler, I absolutely love because I can see through it. The numbers are nice and big. I can count the squares for my increments. So I know that 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4 gives me a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. So I want to take that mark, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to take that line where my 4th square is. I want to line up that line with the raw edge of my seam allowance. Line up that line with the raw edge of my seam allowance. I want to draw a line down. And that's why I always say I try to use my wax for this or my white pencil, my white marking pencil. Because some of my darker fabrics, I like to use a marking tool that's lighter. Okay. Go all the way down. But I can see this for right now. And what I'm doing is I measured in from the raw edge over. I measured in a 1/2 inch only on one of my seam allowances, you all. Only on one of the seam allowances, not both, just one. Okay. And I can see that. Okay. So put this to the side. Grab my fabric scissors. Okay. And I want to just cut this seam allowance in half. Going up, take your time, stay on the line, go up, and just keep cutting until you have it cut off. Boom. Okay. Now what I want to do is take my sample, lay my sample back in position. Okay. Seam allowance facing up. Okay. And what I want to do is 2 things. I want to, and this is going to be a few steps. Okay. So cut this off. This is now half of this. I want to take this seam allowance and I want to press it nice and beautiful and flat like that. Okay. Then what I want to do is I want to fold this back like so, and I want to fold and encase my smaller seam allowance with my larger seam allowance. So look at here, okay? 1/2 inch. This is 1 inch. I want to fold and encase this seam allowance with my larger seam allowance, my smaller seam allowance with my larger seam allowance. Look at how it perfectly fits there. I want the raw edges of this seam allowance to lay right on my stitch line, not past my stitch line, not away from my stitch line, right on my stitch line as best as you can, okay? And then, most importantly, I want to press that in place. So here, okay. And of course, within the middle of the week, you'll see this. Of course, this live tutorial will go up right away. But in the middle of the week, you'll see a pre-recorded voiceover tutorial, which helps those of you who need possibly a little bit of a cleaner tutorial. Live is what it is. Okay, so but with a pre-recorded tutorial, sometimes people need that, and they need to be able to see the steps and just broken down a little bit more and not in a live form. And I understand that, and that's why we're here. We're here to offer you different ways of taking in the information for beginner sewing in different ways. As we mentioned before, our live tutorials, our pre-recorded tutorials, which are both on our YouTube channel, World Fulani Living Sew School, and of course, they're also on all of our social media platforms, and we are on every social media platform. So what I want to do now is, as I encased my seam allowance that I cut, okay, I want to now fold this back into the original position and press again. That's why I said this iron, like, love a good press cotton, a good iron, give me some good steam. And I want to press the wrong side, okay? And I want to go back and press my exterior. Now look at what happened. See how that rolls out a little bit? See how it's rolling out? It's a little bit wider. I want to go back and fix that. And if it doesn't stay in position like I want it to, I oftentimes pin that in place to make sure it stays in position, because that's normal. Sometimes that will happen. Keep your fingers away from the seam. Okay, fingers away from the seam. Making sure this is nice and rolled in, nice and tight. I got the same width going all the way up and all the way down. Here, still got a little bit of rolling there. Okay, that's why you practice first, because you want to make all your mistakes in the sample. Make all your mistakes in the sample so you know what you did wrong the first time, and then you know what not to do in your actual garment. So do all your mistakes in the sample. Okay, there we are. Okay, pressed and ready to go. Okay, now I want to go to my machine. So I'm going back to my machine, and there we are. I want to insert my sample into the machine. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. All right, and I'm trying to remember if I'm gonna, which way I'm gonna flip it, or if I'm going to actually shift my needle. So I am once again using a Singer 4411, part of the Singer Heavy Duty series. It is my machine of preference, especially for teaching beginners. It is a durable machine. It's a machine that's easy to use. And I have used the 4411 Singer Heavy Duty series throughout my career as a fashion educator, 20 plus years. It's the machine that is the most durable. It's the machine that I had the least amount of repairs for. It is the machine I highly recommend for beginner sewers. So what I want to do is align the edge of my foot on the left side with my seam line. Okay, align the edge of my foot here on the left side with my seam line, okay? Keep it nice and straight, okay? I want to lower my foot and I want to be, again, right in front of the needle. I want this, don't want to sit in too far and I don't want to be too far back. I want to have the top of my sample sitting right in front of where the first stitch that my needle makes. I want the feed dogs to pull my sample in and I want that first stitch to be on my fabric, okay? So I insert, line up the edge of the left side of my foot with my stitch line and lower my foot in the right position. The top of my sample is sitting right in front of the needle. And what I want to do, I want to switch the position of my needle. So every machine has the capability. So right now it's centered. I want the needle to go far right, okay? Far right. And then what I want to do is take my time and I want to start, okay, back stitch a little, okay. This has to be done slow and accurately, okay? So you're gonna see me take my time because I don't wanna go off of the folded edge of my sample. And I'm keeping this edge of the foot aligned with my original stitch line. Edge of the foot aligned with my original stitch line. And going down. This is something that you don't want to do quickly. Take your time. Sew at your own pace. And I'm checking as I'm sewing. Beautiful. Okay. Going down. Take your time. Okay. Same thing as I end, I backstitch, just like as when I began, I backstitched. Okay. Lift my foot of my machine, manually rotate my hand wheel, lift my needle out of the sample, pull my sample to the left, and use my nippers, clippers, snippers, whatever you want to call them, and cut my thread away from my sample, let my threads go to the back, and I want to take my sample, of course, to be ironed, okay? So going back to my ironing station, as you can see, once again, what I want to do, clean it up, okay? I want to clean it up. Cut off my threads that I don't need or the threads that are hanging off. Look at how beautiful this is. Look at how beautiful that is. So this is our flat felled denim seam, jean seam. You'll hear those terms. It's technically called a flat felled seam, okay? Look at my interior. Look at my wrong side. This is the side that faces my skin. So if this was a shirt and I had a sleeve, okay, that's how it would look, okay? Look how beautiful that is. It's one of my favorite seams to teach. It's one of my favorite seams to do in a garment. It's one of my favorite seams to design with when I'm illustrating. I love a good flat felt seam. It doesn't necessarily have to be on denim. I love doing it on shirting. I love doing it on skirts. I love doing it in a variety of different garments that you would not normally see it in. So I want to, of course, always finish my sample with a good pressing, some good steam. My iron is on a cotton setting. Okay. Now, this is why I say I am going to teach you based upon industry standards. Look at how perfect that is. Okay. So the steps that I'm giving you each week and our sewing tutorials on the Royal Fulani Living Sew School channel are going to be based upon industry standards. That is the only way that I know how to teach because that is the way that I was taught. And that is the way that the industry functioned when I was working in the industry. I only saw things executed based upon industry standards. So how neat that is, and we'll go back to the jeans, okay? And you can see, here's the flat felt seam that's in my jeans. And here is the flat felt seam that I made, okay? Same thing. Look at this. I've got this welted or edge on here. I've done the same thing here, okay? I've got my stitch line here, which is my first seam that I made. That's also there as well. And then I have my final stitch line here, which is there as well. This is also called an encased seam. You'll hear it categorized as an encased seam, which means I'm just taking the raw edges of my seam allowance and I'm encasing it inside of the seam allowance. I'm encasing it in the seam allowance. So as you can see, there's no raw edges to be found. No raw edges in my seam to be found. These are just for the sample. So there's no raw edges in my seam to be found. Let's look at the inside of the jeans. Okay. As you can see, same thing. Same thing. Okay. Look at your comparison. Always compare your samples to your actual garment. So this is something that you can absolutely use in seams. Here's my jeans. Here's the seam that I made. Same thing. Okay. Now they do have an additional stitch line, and jeans are, you're going to find, I love top stitch. I love denim because I love the top stitch. I love doing top stitch. I love seeing top stitch. It just, it flattens out the seam beautifully. It's just a really great technique to use pretty much all the way across the board, in woven garments and also in knits as well. But here we have our flat felt seam. Okay. What I would say to you again, once again, each week we will be here for Sewing Shortcut Saturday and Sunday. We are Royal Fulani Living Sew School. We have a YouTube channel. We're on IG, we're Facebook, we are TikTok, we are Threads. You can find the tutorials in whatever suits you. If you're not a person that uses TikTok, we're on Facebook. If you're not a person that uses Facebook, we're on Instagram. If you're not a person that's on Instagram, you got the YouTube channel. So we're basically serving all demographics of beginner sewers who may possibly be neurodiverse, newbie, or a non-sewer, someone who's never seen a machine before. That's who we're catering to. We're catering to the novice who may have sewn a little, but kind of pulled back because something got frustrated. We're catering to our neurodiverse community of creatives. We're catering to our non-sewing creatives, which are individuals who are like, oh God, I just got a machine, but what machine do I get? I want to start to learn to sew. We are here for you. So our mission is we are building the confidence and community of the neurodiverse, newbie, and non-sewer, one creative at a time. And this is a passion project for me. So I absolutely love teaching beginners. Once again, you all also know that we can take your DMs, we can take your messages. If you have something specifically you want to ask me about something that you're specifically doing that you need assistance to, we are part of a group of sewing groups on various social media platforms. But if there's something directly you need to ask, absolutely upload your questions in the comments. I will answer them individually because I understand that learning to sew for the first time, when you look at all the YouTube tutorials that are available, it can be intimidating. It can be frustrating. But your goal ultimately is you're going to want to sew a garment. That's your first goal. Like, I want to make my own shirt. Learn the fundamentals first. Okay. The more you create that foundation and learn the fundamentals first of sewing, that will make you a better sewer. And as a matter of fact, it'll make you an expert sewer. So once again, I'm only giving you guys information that is based upon industry standards. I will only teach you the sewing techniques based upon industry standards. We're gearing it towards our new sewers, novice sewers, neurodiverse sewers. And once again, I am Mina Diaz-Stevens. I'm going to be your sew guide for Royal Fulani Living Sew School. For those of you who don't know me, I have a brand called Royal Fulani Living. It is a lifestyle and fashion brand that I started with my family based upon my bicultural upbringing of Senegal, West Africa, and the United States. And we basically create original African prints and we put them on everyday products. But this, being a fashion educator, is my joy. So I absolutely love sharing this information with you all. I will see you all next week. We'll have another tutorial. Look for us, subscribe, like, go to any of our social media pages, and just follow us. So we're excited to be here. I'm excited to be sharing this information with you, and everybody have a great week. And I will see you next week for either Sewing Shortcut Sunday or Sewing Shortcut Saturday. And of course, I will put up the promos and the information before we actually know which one we're going to do, whether or not it's going to be Saturday or Sunday. So you'll have that information. It'll come to you soon. Also, you can sign up for our mailing list on our website, www.worldfulaniliving.com, and you will be the first to know when our tutorials drop. You'll be the first to know when we're having classes. And of course, send me your questions about your sewing projects. All right, you all. See you next week. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.